The introductory season to the Bleach 1000 Year Blood War arc ended in December, ending with the biggest turning point to Ichigo's character, with both a new mentality and new Zanpakuto's. Episode 13, The Blade Is Me, was honestly my favorite point in the whole series, even despite the fights and seeing Yamamoto's Bankai. Why? Well, from the very beginning of Bleach, there was so much foreshadowing from Zangetsu not being the real Zangetsu, to Yuha being the final enemy, and the fact that White was his true Zanpakuto. Ichigo's story is one of self-denial and the rejection of internal conflicts to a concluding scene of peace and tranquility, ending the final episode with "You Are Me." In this video, I want us to go in depth and to show you guys the significance and foreshadowing that led to this point. Before we get into today's video, I just want to say that this is my first YouTube video on this channel, and I have so much more planned. If you're interested in more Bleach related content, please subscribe and like the video. Thank you, and let's get into the video. Before we get into the analysis, I want us to do a summary on what led us to this point. If you want to skip the summary, I left timestamps in the description. So let's get straight into the summary. In chapter 63, or episode 19 of Bleach, we see that Ichigo is turning into a hollow and undergoing this process in order to gain his Shinigami powers back. In this episode, in Ichigo's inner world, we end up having to meet a man named... I couldn't hear his name. In this current part of Bleach, the fact that Ichigo has a hollow inside of him is teased when he's revealed to have a mask on, which he takes off. At this time, we are unsure who this man is, and we assume that he is the spiritual form of Ichigo's Zanpakuto. We learn a couple chapters later that his name is Zangetsu, or what we believe to be his name. The chapter that we learn his name, Zangetsu, is titled The Blade and Me. I'm sure you can already discern the two names, The Blade and Me and The Blade Is Me, from each other. But for now, we're going to stick to the plot and how this all comes together. In The Blade and Me, Ichigo learns the name of his Zanpakuto, Zangetsu. He believes that the man is his blade and that was his name to summon him. After some chapters later and Ichigo raiding the Soul Society to save Rukia, he is in a battle with Kenpachi Zaraki, to which he comes very close to losing. He calls out to Zangetsu when he's close to dying and tells him after being asked if he wants to win or live, he tells him that he wants to win. After being sent to his inner world, we end up seeing an Ichigo who is very pale with yellow eyes, for now we will call White, to which he states that Ichigo knows him. The two end up sparring. White lectures him, mocks him for how he uses Zangetsu, asking him, how could you be friends with somebody you just met, simply by asking for their name? White tells Ichigo that he doesn't even try to understand Zangetsu. After this battle, Ichigo learns to not treat Zangetsu as if he's a tool, rather than the two of them are in battle together. Because of this, he's able to beat Zaraki, who simply sees his Zanpakuto as just a tool, by understanding that he needs to fight with Zangetsu, and that he's not alone. For a brief moment before Ichigo enters battle again, we see White and Zangetsu talk. White tells Zangetsu that Ichigo is the king of the inner world, and that he has to win, insinuating that if he dies, it would be really bad for them. White ends up being absorbed by Zangetsu, but before that he tells Zangetsu to nurture him well and that Ichigo's power will be his eventually. Then we get an impactful monologue from Zangetsu to Ichigo, stating that it's painful to be rained upon in the inner world. Whenever Ichigo feels despair, he will do anything to give him as much power to not feel that rain again. Still in the Soul Society arc, Yoruichi and Ichigo go underground so that Ichigo can learn Bankai in 3 days. When Zangetsu ends up being summoned, Ichigo is challenged to defeat him. With 100 swords around him, Zangetsu tells Ichigo that only one of the swords can defeat him, and his challenge is to find the correct one. With sheer determination, Ichigo eventually defeats him, supposedly, and learns Bankai. Through a rigorous amount of battles, Ichigo finally faces the foe that he was trying to battle the whole time so that he could save Rukia, which is Byakuya. Their battle goes back and forth, with Ichigo seemingly winning, until Byakuya uses his Bankai form Senkei, and brings Ichigo to the brink of death. When Ichigo is close to death, his face is covered with a hollow mask, mocking Ichigo that we can assume is White taking over his body. The two end up fighting, telling Byakuya that he has no name. However, Ichigo breaks free, and after wounding Byakuya, White doesn't show up for the rest of the Soul Society arc. During the beginning of the Arrancar arc, Ichigo is constantly being caught up to by White. White is telling him that he's going to take over his body. Because of this, Ichigo ends up becoming very scared of battle and worried that his body will be taken over if he continues trying to fight. But then, this guy shows up. Grimmjow, and they end up fighting. Ichigo basically loses this battle, and in a desperate attempt to defeat Grimmjow, he throws out a black Getsuga Tensho, which is one of White's combat abilities. After this, he trains to master his inner hollow, so that he can battle once again. When trying to master his inner hollow, he eventually has to go back to the inner world and battle him again. Ichigo asks White, "Where's Zangetsu?" with White replying that he is Zangetsu. Ichigo plans on defeating White with Bankai until he realizes White can too use Bankai. The battle begins, with Ichigo losing once again. White mocks him and gives him a speech and tells him that he's not gonna worship somebody weaker than him. Ichigo ends up winning, and White warns him that if Ichigo doesn't want to have his body taken over, he has to stay alive. Ichigo wins again and ends up being able to control his inner hollow, wearing his mask, which gives him tremendous power. Eventually, Ichigo comes into contact with the Espada 4, Ukiura. Ichigo and him begin to fight. Ichigo ends up getting killed. His dying wish is to help Orihime and not to let her die. From this, he turns into a Vastor level hollow, beginning to fight the 4th Espada, completely no-diffing him in the process. As you could probably guess, especially if you're through the whole anime, this is the manifestation of White. After Ichigo died and he warned him. After this, White isn't seen again until late into the fake Katakudaton arc. In this arc, Ichigo needs to defeat Aizen, and to do so, he needs to go into his inner world and learn the final Getsuga Tensho. In this world, he meets a much younger version of Zangetsu, named Tensa Zangetsu. In this inner world, the world is submerged with water from how much it's rained, signifying how much despair Ichigo has been in. White ends up being ripped out of Ichigo, which Zangetsu tells him that White is the root of Ichigo's despair. White and Zangetsu end up combining and fighting Ichigo. It appears that if Ichigo wins, he will learn the final Getsuga. Towards the end of the battle, Ichigo realizes that he only feels despair from White/Zangetsu's blade, to which he ends up accepting the blade. He doesn't feel pain because they are both originally Ichigo, and he chose to accept them. It's revealed that Zangetsu refused to tell him the final Getsuga Tensho to protect him, because after using this attack, Ichigo would lose his Shinigami powers. After this, neither of them are seen until the 1000-year Blood War arc. The 1000-year Blood War arc takes place in the near future of Bleach after the Fullbring arc, which neither White nor Zangetsu appear in that arc. Basically, the Quincy, which is a group who destroys hollows rather than reaps them, plans on destroying the Soul Society, and they declare war onto the Soul Reapers. The leader, Yuha, is the king of the Quincy and desires to kill the Soul King. Finally, we get to the most recent time we see both Zangetsu and White. It's revealed that Ichigo's mother, Hisaki Kudasaki, was a Quincy and was bitten by a hollow, which was White in his purest form. White at this time was a very strong hollow created by Aizen. Ichigo's father, Isshin, decides to sacrifice his Shinigami powers to save Misaki. They end up falling in love and eventually having Ichigo. The powers of Quincy, Shinigami, and Hollow all transfer to Ichigo. When forming his new Zanpakuto, after having it destroyed by Hazwatch, it's revealed that Zangetsu is not actually Zangetsu and that he's been lying to Ichigo the whole time. That White is actually his true blade, and that the man we thought was Zangetsu was the enemy of the 1000-year Blood War arc, Yuha. Ichigo's inner world is submerged as soon as he realizes this and questions Yuha's intentions, if Yuha is actually the enemy or an ally, to which he responds he is neither. The truth is revealed. Yuha wanted to protect Ichigo and keep him away from combat, because if he continued the fight, then he would eventually fight the physical representation of Yuha and not the one in Ichigo's inner world. He suppressed Ichigo's real power, Zangetsu, to hopefully keep him wanting to stay out of battle. After a while, however, Yuha's heart swayed in Ichigo's favor and wanted Ichigo to defeat him. After this, he relinquishes the hold onto Ichigo's real Zanpakuto and gives it to Ichigo. Ichigo refused to let Yuha go, because to him, both Yuha and White are both Zangetsu. From this point on, he refuses to fight against White, he refuses to ask for help from Yuha, and he refuses to ask Tensa Zangetsu to work with him. From this point onward, he chooses to fight on his own, because he accepts both his Quincy and Hollow side as himself. And at this point, this marks the end of two supporting characters from the beginning of the series. The Blade is Me is a pivotal chapter in the anime Bleach as it explores the inner workings of our main character, Ichigo Kudasaki. This chapter is significant in terms of character development as it highlights Ichigo's journey on accepting his inner Hollow as well as his inner Quincy powers. The more the series progresses, the more that Ichigo no longer rejects the sides of him that he used to feel would take over his body, and begins to accept him as a part of himself. Every time you saw either Zangetsus, each moment was filled with foreshadowing and symbolism that further enhanced the depth of Ichigo's character. The thing that a lot of people who don't deeply look into Bleach lack to understand is that they believe White is an inner demon who's trying to take over his body, similar to Kurama from Naruto or Sukuna from Jujutsu Kaisen. White, his inner hollow, only desired to protect Ichigo this whole time, taught Ichigo instinct to have resolve to take down his opponents. He taught Ichigo about his love for battle and to get stronger and to find a means to protecting himself and the others he loved by becoming stronger. Because White is a part of Ichigo, he knows how much despair and depression it brings Ichigo when he can't protect anybody or when he loses his powers. This is a consistent concept throughout the story of Bleach. Symbolism behind White is that he's actually the physical representation of the side of Ichigo which he chooses to reject, the one who loves battle, the one who wants to be strong and to win instead of live. That's why Ichigo beats White when he tells Yuha that he wants to win, because that's what White also wants. So because of this whole time, White has been trying to protect Ichigo. What about Yuha? Yuha also wanted to protect Ichigo, however in a different way. Yuha wanted to protect Ichigo from battling himself, therefore he tries to sway Ichigo out of combat and to overpower the instinctive side of Ichigo, White, to keep Ichigo from becoming strong and eventually having to face himself. We see from nearly the very beginning, however, that Yuha's heart begins to sway for Ichigo to enter combat. He wants to keep Ichigo's inner world from reigning, which means to keep Ichigo from feeling despair, and therefore chooses to give him as much power as he needs so that Ichigo doesn't feel that despair any longer. When he teaches Ichigo Bankai, he tells him one of the blades can defeat him, Zangetsu, which is foreshadowing the final fight between him and Ichigo. See, for the whole series, Ichigo has not been using his real Bankai, however a manifestation of his Quincy powers from Yuha in his inner world. Hence why his outfit looks a lot like his Quincy counterpart. The blade he's been using isn't his real blade either. Up until the blade is me, he's only been using his Quincy powers and a fraction of his true hollow Zanpakuto abilities. Yuha teaches the abilities of White, however does not release full grasp on Ichigo's abilities until the very end. When it comes time for Ichigo to grasp his real Zanpakuto, White, he rejects the idea that Yuha isn't his real Zanpakuto either. He tells him that he sees both his Quincy side and his hollow side as his Zanpakuto. He understands the reason behind his despair is because of the rejection of his hollow side and for a split second his Quincy side. He tells both of them that they are him, finally accepting the sides of him that he chose to reject and accepting himself. Those two sides of himself that he chose to reject at first, both becoming manifestations of two separate Zanpakuto. To me, acceptance has always been a big part of Ichigo's character, as this whole time he was stronger than all of the foes he faced so far in the anime. However, he could never defeat them because of the sides of himself that he rejected, sides of him that wanted to protect himself through battle or simply wanted to go back to being a normal person. We see this internal conflict with Ichigo throughout the series, of him wishing he could live a normal life, however feeling powerless when he actually ends up becoming powerless. This internal conflict weighs on him up until the very end of the series, where he chooses to fight for himself and not with or against the sides of himself that he accepts or rejects. Hence why the blade and me and the distinction from the blade is me is so pivotal. This story of Ichigo, I feel like, can be related to a whole lot of scenarios that people face in real life. Ichigo is somebody that we see who rejects a lot of parts of himself, the times that he wants to fight and the times that he doesn't want to fight. His hollow, his Quincy, he rejects all of these things and feel like these things are holding him back from being stronger and being the person that he wants to be so that he can protect everybody. However, what we all come to learn is that when he finally accepts the sides of himself that he sees as bad or that makes him weaker, he becomes significantly stronger alongside those two blades of his. So this goes out to whoever's watching this video. Is there a side of you that you feel like you can't show to the world? Do you have insecurities that eat you up on the inside? Are there things that you want to do in this world that you're afraid to do? You need to understand this. Things that you feel inside of yourself that hold you back are your greatest asset. You can become stronger. You can become anything you want in this world if you come to face your own fears and doubts. And with that, that's the end of the video. I plan on adding the Fullbring arc to this video, but I feel like it wasn't as relevant as I wanted the video to kind of be more on Ichigo's Zanpakuto, get his own development. So if you want a video on the Fullbring arc, then or anything about Fullbrings, then let me know and I'll make a video like that. Like I said, this is the first video on this channel, so any type of support would be appreciated. More videos coming soon. Thank you, and I'll see you guys again.